Hello, good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear teacher. This is our forum, our second forum, and this is our task, our video task for this is my chapter, which is chapter 7 on error correction. And I'm in charge of doing the review. And here we go. Well, I really enjoyed reading chapter 7 because it's really interesting. It mainly focuses on four parts. And let's talk first on this quote. It says, "It's only those who do nothing that make no mistakes." So it's really asking us that, or letting us know that everybody makes mistakes. So we should be aware of them. And let's go down. And let me talk about the four parts of the chapter. The first part, it talks about the differences between error and mistakes. So the differences between error and mistakes, it will give us the definitions of error and mistakes. The second part is the historical development of error correction. So let me find it for you guys. It's the historical development of error correction. And the third part are the types of errors committed by the learner and the role of interlanguage. We will be discussing what's the meaning also of interlanguage. Um, the fourth part talks about the ways to correct those errors. Okay, so this is the last part, the final part will be the ways to correct those errors. This is the role, the types of errors, and the role of interlanguage. The second part, remember, is the historical development of error correction, which is not so complicated. And the difference between error and mistake is the first one. So let's go on. The first part is let's define what is error and define what is a mistake. So it says that an error reflects gaps in a learner's knowledge. So an error is a gap. It's because the learner doesn't know what is correct. He doesn't know, he doesn't have the knowledge, he lacks the knowledge. And a mistake is an occasional lapse. Or down here, it will tell us that a mistake is just a performance error. It can happen to anybody. In Spanish, in English, in any language, we can make mistakes. So, Ellis, therefore, lets us know that teachers should know what errors the learners are committing. Yeah, we should be aware of the mistakes, but we should understand that the errors are the ones that we should attack, we should try to correct, or have the students corrected by themselves. Ellis points out that the students themselves should actually benefit from carrying out self-correction, which is the ideal of what we want the students to do. Now, let's talk about the second part. So you guys understand error and mistake. Error is lack of knowledge. They don't know the answer. And the mistake is just a performance. It's a glitch. Maybe I forgot how to use it, or I was speaking too fast, and I made a mistake in my speaking. So then after this, we can talk about uh, how the studies began analyzing uh, errors. So the one of the first techniques was the contrastive analysis hypothesis, which understood how the learners made errors, but it didn't explain all the errors. So then we focused on error analysis. And the goal of this was to discover what the learners really knew. And we can begin by organizing the types of errors. Okay, what are the types of errors? So here we can start by lexical error. Okay. Lexical error will be according to the vocabulary. Pronunciation errors would be phonological errors, syntactic errors, or interpretive errors. All right. Another one is pragmatic errors. How many do we have? One, two, three, four, five. We should have five. One, two, three, four, five. That's right. We have five. Those are all the errors. We should be able, as teachers, to classify errors and then classify them even more by errors of omission, errors of overgeneralization, transfer errors. Here are three errors, three categories that we can classify the top errors in. All right. So let's look at the classifications. Um, Errors of omission is when the student leaves out maybe an article. I in the library. They don't say I am, I was. Errors of overgeneralization. You guys can see sometimes the students will make up their own words because they think that all the words follow the same pattern and they don't. Transfer errors, you know, usually come from the L1 language transferred onto the second language. I am studying English since 5 years. Or when you ask students, how old are you? Or they ask you, how many years are you old? Because in Spanish we say, ¿cuántos años tienes? So they would transfer errors from the L1 language. Let's continue. Make it a super long. Okay, so there's further classification which talks about local errors and global errors. Global errors can be the most important errors that we must correct. They make a big mistakes. Those are big errors. And local errors are small errors that need to be corrected in the sentence. Let's go down. It says to be able to detect why the error, this is teachers who have knowledge of the L1 of the learner may be able to recognize of the interference and detect why the error is being committed. If you speak Spanish, you know why they're making the error. If the learner is a Spanish speaker, but in my case, like my Chinese students, I really don't know why sometimes they make certain errors. Um, or another type of error would be the context of learning error. The teacher and the textbook sometimes may be wrong. Sometimes we give the wrong answers, the wrong explanations. And this is what Brown calls context errors or context of learning errors. Now, let's talk about interlanguage. Selinger used the term interlanguage to refer to the form of a language used by the learner in the initial stages. This is not the native language nor the target language. It's like a hybrid language. It's the intermediate language that the learner has to eventually transfer to the learn language, to the L2 language. Now, we have four stages. We can say four stages of language development based on errors. Now, we can say that some errors the students commit will be random errors. This is when the students are vaguely aware that there is some systematic order or particular class system. Another one will be the emergent stage. In this stage, the learner is unable to correct errors when they are pointed out by someone else. We have the systematic stage where the learner is able to correct his errors when they are pointed out. And finally, the stabilization stage where the student has the ability to self correct. is the final stage that we can have in language development. Fossilization. That sounds like dinosaurs or something like that. Now, fossilization says that is the imposition of the L1 accent onto the target language or the frequent observation of syntactic or lexical errors. So you see that is the accent. Fossilization means that you carry on uh, maybe your accent from your Spanish. So we can say maybe I would say that it can be Spanglish when people are speaking English, and they carry on to English what they're learning in Spanish. Or in some cases, I have seen in Mexico some students carry on um, English from when they speak Spanish. Like in Mexico, they say "cacha la bola," meaning catch the ball, and they carry that word catch to Spanish. They say cacha la bola or something, and they use a lot of words. I can't think of many right now, but they do. Now, the incorporation of incorrect linguistic, yes, they talk about how normal and natural stages for most learners. This is normal. This is not abnormal. It's okay. So let's continue. Let me see what else is here. Next page. So now we can see that errors are then a natural part of learning. No, we make errors learning, and it's okay to make errors. All right. So now the danger inherent is that the teacher may pay too much attention to the errors. And sometimes I have committed the same mistakes. Sometimes I'm constantly correcting the student and I don't let the student speak. So that's not good. And we say that the ultimate goal of language learning is to attain communicative fluency. So you have to let the student speak. Don't correct him too much. Is the danger of paying too much attention to the errors. Now, error correction is perhaps the principal role of the EFL teacher. All right. So what is the role of the EFL teacher in the classroom? To correct errors. But we have to know how to do them. Okay. So it says the task of the teacher is to give the amount of error correction which is appropriate for the level of the individual. Now, important is how. How are we going to supply error correction? How are we going to do it? And we talk about four possibilities. Okay. Now, the first one is whether to indicate it immediately or not. And the second one is who will correct it. The third one is maybe postpone the correction until later. And finally, you can ignore the error. It depends on the teacher what has to be adopted. Now, find out what the student thinks and feels and what they want to do. This is said right here by Nunan. Find out what they want to learn. And you will be more aware of how you're going to correct the student. With large groups, it's very difficult and it's almost impossible to to know what each student and how each student wants to learn. But with small groups, we can do it. Now, let me continue. Um, these are some correction techniques that they teach us, like repeating, saying sorry, tell me again, echoing, denial, which is said that it's probably not the best because the student might feel bad in front of other students. So denial, echoing, repeating, questioning. The teacher may say, hey, is that correct or not? Expression and recasts. You know, I usually do recasts. I say it again. Now, it says, try to get the students to correct their own mistakes. Try to get the students to correct their own mistakes. Or you can have peer correction as well. And eventually, the teacher can also correct them. Um, it said that time must be allowed for thought. We must allow the students to think, and you must give the students enough time to correct themselves. Ideally, for the students to correct themselves. Now, it is also said that people are most likely to continue in a conversation when other people agree. So if the teacher is constantly correcting, your student doesn't want to engage with you. Um, so it says, how do we correct errors? Well, it's a complex issue. You must be tactful. As a teacher, we must know when to interrupt the students and how to treat the students in an opportune moment, which is something that I liked what they said. Let me see. Um, our fight is between now when do we do it? Our fight is between accuracy and fluency. So it depends what activities you are doing, you know, and then you will understand what should I correct. For example, in my warm-ups, in my class warm-ups, I tend to correct very little. I don't correct a lot because it's the warm up. I want the student to start talking and get free and feel comfortable. Now, if we get to grammar, then I will try to correct the students much more. Now, it says, when should we intervene? When should we intervene? Um, it says, Lynch says the best answer to that question is as late as possible. So let the student talk and try not to intervene as much. And then we talk about a balance of error correction. So balance your correction and know when to do it or not. And finally, it says the teacher has a vital role to play in the treatment of errors. Okay? And hopefully, the teacher is a facilitator, not a dictator. Okay? So, if you guys understand what this chapter is about, is understanding what is mistake, what is an error. Focus on errors. Correct the errors, but know how to do it and when to do it. And identify and classify the errors. Thank you very much. I wish you guys the best. See you in class.